Well, hello and welcome to Organize Your Life. I am Janet Taylor. I have been helping people get organized for over 28 years, and I help them create space to attract more money, love, and happiness in their lives. And today I have Michelle Thornhill, and she is an end of life doula. And you're probably wondering what that is, but that is why I have her here today to explain what she does, why she decided to do it, but how she can help all of us in life's transitions, because it's all about when we're born, all the wonderful things in the middle and the things that we have to deal with sometimes that are uncomfortable. And then, of course, end of life as well. So, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Janet.
So before I get into a conversation with Michelle, I just want to read her bio. And it says, Michelle Thornhill is a sought-after speaker and consultant who makes discussing important topics manageable. She's an advanced certified grief recovery specialist and end-of-life doula and the founder of Legacy and Hope LLC, a boutique company that helps individuals and organizations with grief, loss, bereavement, and end-of-life care. As a member of the board of directors for the National End of Life Doula Alliance, Michelle co-chairs the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. She has over 20 years of experience in bereavement care and a desire to share proven coping strategies as well as action programs to help individuals move beyond the pain that comes with grief, loss, and end of life. Michelle is also a member of the advisory board of the Girls Leading Africa and the Philadelphia chapter president of the International Association of Women. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for
So,
having me.
so I have a couple of questions. The first question is, what is an end of life doula?
Well, we get that question all the time. An end-of-life doula is a non-medical individual that assists the dying and their families through the process of death. And the assistance can come in a variety of ways. It depends on the niche services that the end-of-life doula offers. So in my situation, I started working and volunteering in funeral service back in 1985. So it's actually been a little more than 20 years worth of experience that I have in this industry. And my experience lends itself well to being able to help people with funeral service, burials, and I'm also an advanced certified grief specialist. So with that, I use that in my practice to be able to help heal some of the pain that people are experiencing when having to make difficult decisions or have difficult conversations. So there's this thing that we call the doula heart. And most people have it. And the doula heart is ancient and it shows up when you need it the most, because we've all had experiences with helping people at end of life. And everybody has an opportunity to be an end of life doula in scope, an end of life doula just helps people with the transition from life to death as well as their families.
So was there any particular reason why you decided to do this? Because I know you were working in a funeral home, but was there any other reason specifically what made you decide to become an end-of-life doula as well as an expert grief counselor?
Oh, thank you. Well, it was when I was working in funeral service, I was seeing, people come in riddled with grief. And then I used to manage several cemeteries, some historic in nature. And oftentimes I'll say that I, bury approximately 1,800 people a year because that is profound to me. And that stands out as this never-ending cycle of, grief and death and how, it just doesn't take a holiday. So I was seeing people coming back to the cemetery on a regular basis, and they were riddled with grief and they couldn't overcome their grief. They couldn't properly cope with their grief. So I decided to become a grief support specialist. And when I became a grief support specialist, I was noticing that most of the time people were talking about the loss of a loved one or undelivered communication with that loved one, having some, guilt perhaps over how the transition happened. So I decided to get in front of that and, help people through the transition and help them to be able to create an atmosphere where I could introduce, some dialogue prompts, and that would allow space for them to have this helpful and heartfelt communication during some of the most tender moments leading up to death. So that was the main reason why I became an end-of-life doula, because we oftentimes know how to live well, but we don't know how to die well, and we also don't know how to help others to be able to die well. So that was important to me.
And I like what you were sharing about, grief counseling because, and I want everyone watching to know is when, John, a man I had been dating for almost 5 years, and we were about ready to celebrate our 5th anniversary, he passed away suddenly of a heart attack. And I remember because when it happened was in the midst of the 2020 pandemic where nobody could go out their houses. We couldn't kind of really comfort, no one could comfort me. And I remember reaching out to Michelle, and Michelle was able to, and our conversations really helped me not only deal with that grief, but really just kind of deal with how I had been managing grief overall, because and I really looked at some numbers, because when I had a conversation with you, Michelle, my mother had passed away like 19 years prior, and my dad 35 years prior. And I didn't realize, and you said something that just made me like, wow, that aha moment, because when my mother passed away, it was as the midst of the 9/11. And then when my dad was killed, he was killed on Christmas, and you just were like, just unpacking, unraveling all the things and just helping me really cope with not only the grief of John, but just all the trauma I had been through. So, and that's why I really wanted to have this conversation with you, because I don't think sometimes we are so focused on, just kind of getting through the grief, managing the funeral and all the stuff afterwards with the estate, and never really dealing with our own self. But also because I've seen some of the wonderful pictures of you, particularly with this one client where I think she's sitting in a chair and you're sitting next to her, and it looks like you're just having a conversation. She's probably sharing some wisdom because, it looks like she's lived many years. And so what are some of the just things, and I know you also mentioned, I believe it was in Time Magazine as well, correct?
Yes.
So, yes, so some of the things that you kind of, do with some of your clients.
Well, you hit on one of them. I think what's really important is that we realize how much compounded grief we actually experienced throughout our lifetimes, because there's 40 plus different types of losses that can trigger grief. But you have, laid out in our conversation today just a loss history, and people very rarely take stock of their loss history. So when I'm, helping clients, whether it's the dying individual or their family, I look at things like that, and I use that in a way to be able to help them to be able to transition through, from pain to being satisfied with where they are right now in their lives. But as it pertains to some of the roles that I play in my client's life and in their family's life, I actually advocate for the dying individual. And I work as a liaison with the medical care team and other organizations to provide the best value-centered, customized services possible for the dying and their families, because no two people are going to have the same experience. I like to say even identical twins are different people. So why should we have anything that's cookie cutter? So I help them customize and plan funerals and select their final resting place in advance or even at the time of need. I also help to create an environment that the dying person finds acceptable for their, last wishes, and for what they want to see and what they want to hear and what they want to experience before death. I also help the dying person to be able to tie up any loose ends that they might have, like, anything that they have that's lingering, like conversations or, filing documents. I want them to be able to pass in peace. And I'm basically a caretaking confidant, and a heart with ears, as well as a soft place for individuals to land, knowing that I'm capable of helping them through some of the toughest days of their lives and beyond.
And it's just so beautiful what you do, because as someone who took care of my mother full time, it would have been so nice to have known someone like you to really kind of just be able to reach out to. Because when you're taking care of somebody 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it is exhausting. And I learned that on the back end of how tired I really was. But I was so used to just kind of doing the routine and going in motion, and it's really good. But also, like you said, it's creating, because of your experience, it's creating that environment. And also, sometimes people do need an advocate when it comes to that point in their life, because other people are trying to make so many different decisions for them, and it's like, well, what's going to make them happy? So that is just wonderful, Michelle. Wonderful, Michelle. So how can people reach out to you? How can they learn about your services?
hmm The easiest way is to just visit my website, and they can schedule a time to have a conversation with me at legacyandhope.com. Or they can simply call me. I think telephone calls are, becoming a thing of the past, but I want to bring that back, have that person to person contact. So people can feel free to call my business line, and the number is 267-225-2280.
And of course, I will have all the information and a link to Michelle's website below. And I'll also have a link, because Michelle was also a guest on my podcast. So I'll have that link as well too. So Michelle, thank you so much for your time today. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you so very much, Janet. It was a pleasure.